Hello guys, welcome back. A new fanfic. If interesting, please like and share. Let's start fanfic. Sakura-chan. Would you go out with me? Naruto chimed casually and almost absent-mindedly. It had become a force of habit. Naruto had been trying for so long to gain the girl's affection, dating back since the early days of the academy. Of course, the pink-haired girl would rebuff him every time, and he had come to expect it. He had gotten so used to it that he would just shrug it off and try again later. But it would be different this time. For Sakura, the day had been the worst she had in a long time. She had overslept, and did not have the time to blow dry her hair so she could look good for Sasuke. Then, she didn't even have enough time for breakfast when she realized that if she didn't get out of the house quickly, she would be late. While she had managed to snag a piece of toast, she had dropped it in her rush to get to the bridge where they have their meeting. If that wasn't bad, she realized that it was all in vain just to get to the bridge on time, as Kakashi was late once again. And to make matters worse, Kakashi was 4 hours late, an hour later than usual. To say she was irritated was a severe understatement. Naruto asking her out was the worst thing he could do at the moment, and in spite having tried to keep her anger in check, she snapped. Stop annoying me, you idiot. I've told you 1,000 times already. I will not go out with you. You are stupid and useless. Not to mention I would never go out with someone as ugly as you even in a million years. No girl in their right mind would. Sakura huffed exasperatedly and stopped her rant before turning around to chase after their other teammate. While she did feel somewhat better after venting her frustration, she wondered whether she had been a bit too harsh. She shrugged off the concern for her blonde teammate and focused on catching up to Sasuke. After all, she rejected Naruto all the time and he always bounced back. Why would this time be different, right? Naruto, however, felt like he had his heart ripped from his chest, then stepped on repeatedly, before being flushed down the toilet. Of all the times Sakura had rejected him, she had never been as harsh as she was now. Sure, she had sometimes been rather blunt when she rejected him in the past, but she had never went as far to say that no girl in her right mind would go out with him. It was worse since he believed it would be true considering he was the container of the Kyuubi and all. Tears threatened to fall, but he would not allow it. He had not cried for years from the hate of the villagers. And he would not cry now. He was stronger than that. But it hurt nonetheless. Naruto eventually bowed his head down low and sighed depressively. He tried to shake the depressing thoughts from his mind, but to no avail. Sakura's words continued to reverberate throughout his mind. Eventually, he decided that standing around won't change anything and decided to go home for some cup ramen to help him get over his misery. Ramen always made him feel better. Though normally he would go to Ichiraku's, but at the moment, he just wanted to be alone, so he could think. Yamanaka Ino was a girl admired by many of her peers. She was beautiful and elegant, earning the envy of many kunoichi her age. Her skills as a kunoichi were also not to be dismissed, as she was easily one of the best kunoichi of her generation. While she was not quite as book-smart as her rival Haruno Sakura, her skills exceeded the pink-haired girl in all other areas. However, she had one fatal flaw. And that was, like most girls her age, she was also known as a fangirl of Uchiha Sasuke. But despite this, she was kind and sympathetic when she wanted to be, at least she liked to think so. It was something she had picked up from selling flowers in her family shop. As they lived in a ninja village, a large portion of customers had been ninjas, and more often than not, flowers were bought as an offering to the dead or a gift to the hospitalized than for love interests. And as such, Ino had developed a sympathetic ear for those customers. Because of this, she had never liked to see others in misery, especially those she knew. And when she found Naruto wallowing in misery as he walked down the street, shoulders slumped and head bowed, she couldn't help but to want to help. She was also immensely curious as to the reason the ever-cheerful boy looking so sad. Not even when Naruto had failed the Genin graduation test did he look so pitiful. And thinking of which, She never did find out how the prankster had ended up passing the exam since she had watched him walk out of the academy that day with his head down and without a hit I-8. So it was with a mixture of curiousness and pity that she approached the blonde-haired boy. "Hey Naruto, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Just leave me alone," he mumbled softly and continued to walk. Ino frowned slightly at being brushed off so rudely, but followed after him. "Come on, tell me what got you looking so gloomy," the blonde girl urged. Naruto sighed knowing that the stubborn girl won't give up until he relented and stopped walking. There was an uncomfortable silence between them, until Naruto finally spoke. "Am I really that bad?" Naruto looked slowly up into her teal eyes, before looking back down at the ground. "Huh." Ino lifted her eyebrows perplexed at his question. "Am I really that bad, that no girl would ever go out with me in a million years?" He repeated softly. Did forehead say that? Naruto just nodded without looking up. "Well, you are pretty annoying at times," Ino blurted out without thought and winced slightly as Naruto seemed to slouch down even more. Making the boy more depressed was not why she had came up to him. Ino patted him in the back and decided that she should be completely honest, yet be gentle with the truth. "Look, Naruto, you are really loud at times. And that gets annoying a lot of times. And while the pranks are funny for a while, after a while it just got annoying. And you don't take your ninja training seriously. That's hardly attractive. And you're nowhere near as handsome as Sasuke-kun. And that jumpsuit you wear is really a big turn-off." Naruto winced every time she mentioned one of his flaws, though he could help but to think it had been the truth. "So you're saying that if I'm quiet, a better ninja and didn't wear orange, then you'll go out with me?" Naruto asked hypothetically after a moment of contemplation, looking into her eyes. Ino grimaced at the thought of dating Naruto. Sure, Naruto wasn't a bad guy, but to her, he was simply not the boyfriend material she looked for. Unsure how to respond in a way that would not hurt the boy's feelings, Ino simply looked away and stayed silent. Despite her silence, Naruto knew what it meant, and took it as a no to his question. He sighed and bowed his head once more, still somewhat depressed, and began to walk away. "Thanks anyways, Ino." Ino stood there dumbfounded, staring at his back. What has he got to thank her for? If anything, she probably made him feel even worse than before. On top of the Hokage monument sat a young boy in deep thought. Naruto always liked this particular spot when he needed to think and reflect on his life. While his normal train of thoughts when he was here to think would be on why the villagers hated him. But this time his thoughts were on a certain girl and her words to him. "I should just give up on Sakura-chan, or any girl for that matter." The ramen he had consumed earlier did in fact make him feel much better. And now that he had cleared his head enough, he began to think. He realized that he had to make a choice. There was no doubt that it was for the best to stop pursuing Sakura as a love interest. He had replayed all the memorable moments he had of his pink-haired teammate in his mind. And came to a startling realization that he had never felt any signs of affection from the girl. She barely even recognized his existence, let alone his worth. Even the girl's rival acknowledged him somewhat, considering she had tried to cheer him up earlier despite failing at it. He supposed it was one of the reasons why he had been so adamant in gaining the girl's attention. Acknowledgement was something he could not live without. It was what his existence and his life dream revolved around. And gaining the acknowledgement from someone that did not acknowledge him was what he strove for. However, she had not been the only one that did not acknowledge him. Almost the entire village had been guilty of that. And that led him to contemplate the true reason why he had been attracted to the girl in the first place. After several moments of reflecting, he believed that it began simply as an act to prove himself against Uchiha Sasuke. The last Uchiha of Konoha was the antithesis to Naruto's life. While he had been known as the dead last Indobi, Uchiha Sasuke was known as a genius and incredibly talented shinobi. And the fact that Sasuke had the acknowledgement of many in the village all because of his Uchiha lineage grated on his nerves when he had to fight for every ounce of recognition. It was natural for him to challenge the one who was the complete opposite to his existence. To prove who was better, to prove that he could change the minds of the villagers. And challenge the boy he did, though so far without success. But somewhere along the line, he had somehow come to the notion that winning over the Uchiha's #1 follower would be the ultimate way for him to prove himself the better. Despite his initial petty reasons for his pursuit of Sakura's affection, he eventually came to genuinely like the girl. She was intelligent, and it was something he had admired, not to mention she was one of the prettiest girls he knew, despite her large forehead that had been the brunt of many jokes from those of their age group. He had always known that Sakura would never be interested in him in a romantic sense, especially not when she was so engrossed in gaining Sasuke's attention for herself. But he would always delude himself to think that he had a chance. The stubborn part of him simply would not accept defeat. Especially not against Sasuke. But it was time he ended his endeavor to win his crush's heart. Sakura had made that perfectly clear that it would be a waste of time. Though here lies the dilemma. Should he search for and pursue other girls or give up entirely? Naruto shook his head slightly at the thought. When he came to think about it, he had never really even thought about the kind of girls he liked. Firstly, he wanted someone mature. Someone that would acknowledge and appreciate him. They would also have to support him in his dream to become Hokage. But most importantly, they must accept him despite having QB sealed within him. But the only ones that fit the bill are women much older than me, Naruto mused. Not that he minded being with older women. In fact, he could argue that he preferred the company of older women, as long as they accepted him and not hate him. Naruto supposed that it was because older women are not as shallow as girls his age. Most girls his age were attracted to Sasuke simply because of his looks despite his cold attitude. It was also the reason he did not get along with most girls in his age group. But Naruto grimaced slightly at the irony, considering he had been crushing on one of the worst offenders for a long time. Then again, older women are unlikely to even look his way. After all, on top of having QB sealed in him, he was known as an idiot, and that's after assuming that an older woman did not mind the age gap. And to top it off, he wasn't good looking, at least according to Sakura and even Ino. This led him to a decision. He was unlikely to find a girlfriend anytime soon. On the other hand, he was still young. If he did not pursue a love life, then he would concentrate on his neglected training so he could one day become Hokage. At the moment, it would seem that focusing on training was for the best, and likely give him the most chance for success. His mind then wandered to his talk with Ino. While it did not help him feel any better at the time, he did appreciate the honesty. He knew the Yamanaka girl was right. He was loud, and his pranks, while funny, did not help him become a good ninja. It had always been a matter of gaining attention. As he did not receive any acknowledgement, he sought it out through different methods by being loud and playing pranks. He even went as far as to wear flashy clothes like the orange jumpsuit he currently wore. Not that he didn't like orange, in fact, he loved the color orange in his jumpsuit. Still, his approach had been only effective to a certain degree. While he did get some attention, it had all been in the negative sense, and because he played pranks by skipping class, his grades in the academy slipped. But despite this downside, Naruto received more attention in his entire life, and even with the threat of failing the academy, he could not bring himself to stop. And despite the lectures on seeing underneath the underneath, few could see underneath this cheerful and idiotic mask he had built up over time by playing pranks. It also served to conceal the sadness that was all too apparent in his eyes to those who knew where to look. If there was anything he truly hated, it was to be pitied. He would rather be hated than be pitied. Not that he would ever be caught brooding like the Uchiha. He'd never live it down otherwise. Naruto decided that if he were to take being a ninja seriously, now that he had given up on Sakura, things had to change. Simply, it was time to stop playing the fool. It would be hard to change as he had acted this way for so long that the facade had practically become part of himself. But now that he had made the decision, he would stick by it. Naruto also knew right now, he was not a good ninja. His poor performance against his sensei during the bell test had been proof of that. And concentrating on training would help him achieve his life goal to become the Hokage in the long run. Naruto snorted slightly. What would he know? He was never good at long-term planning and strategy anyways. Though he was known to have random bouts of ingenuity. And what had Ino said about his clothes? Naruto grimaced slightly. He really liked his clothes, damn it. They were his favorite color. It was his favorite suit after all. Sure, the color was bright and attracted attention like beating someone in the head with a sign that said, "Look at me," but he didn't see the problem with it. Sure, it wasn't a color ninjas wear, but he didn't see anyone complaining about Sakura's bright red clothes. So stealth wasn't really the problem. Naruto sighed again and looked upwards at the sky and rubbed his face with his hands. Perhaps it was time for a change, troublesome. Naruto snorted. He was starting to sound like that bum Shikamaru. Naruto quickly decided that the moment he returned home, the first order of business was to find something different to wear. After all, if he were to change himself, simply by looking different would help in making him feel and act differently. He unlocked his door and closed it behind him absently, before walking straight to his room with purpose in his steps. He slid open his closet and looked at the clothes he had in his wardrobe. Orange, orange, more orange. Naruto scratched his head. Aside from a few t-shirts and shorts and several sets of pajamas, he didn't have anything that wasn't orange. While he decided that there was no problem with orange, all he had for ninja wear were identical sets of the same orange jumpsuit, which he currently wore. And he had already decided that he would wear something different. But Naruto noted that aside from the jumpsuit, he didn't have anything for a ninja. The several t-shirts and shorts he had simply weren't practical. The fabric and stitching simply wasn't made with durability in mind. Naruto decided to take out the sets of orange jumpsuit from his closet so he could throw them out later. But to his surprise, he found a large white coat hidden behind several sets of jumpsuits. It was a long-sleeved white coat that went to his knees like a cloak, with orange lining on the inside and a large orange spiral on the back. Naruto pulled the coat from his closet and rubbed the fabric between his fingers. The blonde smiled fondly at the coat that had been a gift from the Sandaime for his last birthday. His smile deepened as he recalled that Sandaime had gotten the cape for him after he had made an offhanded remark that he had wished he had a cool-looking cape like the Yondaime after seeing a picture of him. It had been too large for him at the time to wear, and even after he had grown tall enough, he had decided that it did not go well with his favorite jumpsuit. He had never worn the cloak and over time forgotten that he had it. But now, if he was to change, he might as well wear it, otherwise it would eventually go to waste. Naruto realized that he still had to purchase some new clothes to wear underneath the cape, and he groaned slightly. He always hated shopping unless it involved spending his money on ramen. It wasn't because shopkeepers gave him trouble because of QB or something like that. They just ignored him if anything. But it was the fact that he found clothes shopping so damn boring. If it was anything that Naruto was not, it was not boring. Deciding to get the shopping done quickly, Naruto left the house in the direction of a store that sold ninja equipment. He quickly picked out several sets of clothing, paid for it, and returned home. Once back inside his apartment, he quickly entered his room and deposited the bags of clothing onto his bed. He then quickly changed into his new clothes, eager to test out his new look like a child with his new toy. The sleeves of the dark blue, almost violet long-sleeve top was a bit loose due to his thin arms. He had never been one to train to increase the size of his muscles, opting for a leaner and more toned body instead. His body and skeletal structure was of a wiry type anyways. He procured several pieces of string from a drawer beside his bed and tied the sleeve to his arm at the wrist and under the elbow so they clung to his arm and not get in the way during a fight. The black shinobi pants were slightly loose, but not too baggy. Just the way he liked them, although they were a bit too loose around the waist without a belt. Naruto untied the knot on the back of his head, removing his hitai from his forehead. He absently brushed aside his bangs that fell over his eyes. He placed the hitai at his waist and used the blue fabric as a belt. He looked into the wardrobe mirror to check his look. His outfit looked too simple, like the average shinobi. And while Naruto decided that he would no longer actively attract attention, it did not mean he wanted to look and be like the average ninja. He would never settle for being average. He removed the hitai, then replaced the blue fabric with orange fabric he torn from his old suits. After spending 10 or so minutes trimming and replacing the fabric, he fed the fabric through the loops on his pants and tied the ends securely behind him as a belt. The demon container then donned his white cape and looked into the wardrobe mirror. He grinned. He had to admit that he looked quite good in the new outfit. He was barely recognizable and looked like a new person. Precisely what he was aiming for. And the more he looked at himself, the more he began to like his new look. Being satisfied with his new look, Naruto changed his thought to the next part of his change. His training schedule. He had no idea to go about his training and decided that some research was in order. Naruto groaned slightly at that thought, as he hated to read and study. But he surmised that if he were to become a good ninja, sacrifices had to be made. And the only way to make up for the knowledge he did not learn in the academy was to study extra hard. But on the bright side, he now had access to the ninja archives now that he was officially a genin. The scrolls and books in the archive are much more useful than those from the Konoha Public Library. All he had to do was to get permission from the Hokage himself. The walk to the Hokage Tower had been weird for Naruto. Most of the older generation villagers and ninja gave him a look that he could not completely decipher. Though they did seem to be a little shocked and surprised. It made Naruto a little unnerved as he had expected the usual fearful and scathing glances. Even the younger generation looked at him differently, particularly the female population that gave him looks that were familiar but he had no clue where he had seen it before. Naruto quickened his pace, slightly nervous at the way people looked at him. Maybe changing my clothes wasn't a good idea. What was with those looks anyways? Bah, why do I care? Gaining permission to access the archives was simple, though the Hokage had been smirking somewhat evilly at him, which further unnerved him. He quickly left the Hokage's office to the room, which contained the genin-level archive. Meanwhile Sarutobi sat in his seat while smoking his pipe. A smirk etched itself onto his face. So he's wearing that cape I gave him. He looks just like you, Yondaime. The coat had been his plan to get the villagers to change their mind about Naruto. He had been a bit disappointed when Naruto did not wear the coat when he had first given it to the boy. It gave the villagers just enough clues to link to become suspicious of Naruto's relationship to the Yondaime, although not quite enough to prove or disprove anything. He wasn't going to publicly announce the truth. At least not yet. But it would be enough to create doubt within the minds of the villagers that had treated Naruto poorly. And they would more likely to hesitate in treating the boy poorly. Naruto gasped slightly in awe at the sight in front of him as he entered the archives. In front of him were thousands upon thousands of scrolls organized into rows and rows of shelves. Naruto went to a table at the studying area and pulled a chair from under the table with a lousy squeaking noise and slowly sat down onto the wooden chair. He rubbed his chin one hand and began to think. With the way my training is going now, I won't be able to improve much. What I need to do is find a direction and perhaps some training methods. And while I'm at it, I might be able to find some genin-level ninjutsu techniques. And it would be good to find anything that would build on my existing jutsu knowledge. But I won't be able to do much. It'll take days just to find and read all the scrolls one need. That leaves no time left for actual training. Not to mention the stuff I need to make up for that I didn't learn in the academy. I'll have to cut down the time I need to gather information. But how? If only he had extra people to help finding what he need. Naruto froze in thought. Extra people. He pondered for a few seconds on the plausibility of his idea before smirking. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto quickly formed the seal and produced 20 clones. The original Naruto called out an order. Alright guys, each of you bring back a scroll that you find useful and bring it back within 10 minutes. Hi. A resounding affirmative came from all the clones as they all moved in different directions. The real Naruto then walked towards the aisle labeled, Chakra Basics. A few minutes later, the clones each brought back a scroll. A pile of scrolls now lay on top of the table. Naruto then dispersed the clones. A rush of information flowed through his mind, letting him know the position of several scrolls within the multitude of scrolls in the archive the clones had spotted that could potentially be useful as future reading. Naruto blinked slightly and analyzed his surprise when he realized he had gotten some of the memories the clones had gained. While the Kage Bunshin had been a skill he had only recently learned, he had not realized the technique's ability to accumulate information. He thought back to the times he had used the jutsu. Aside from the time he used the harem no jutsu on the closet pervert sensei of Konohamaru, he had only used it in combat situations. First with Mizuki, and the other time with Kakashi-sensei during the bell test. Both times he remembered that he had noticed something unusual when he dispersed the clones. He had brushed it aside at the time as he was in a situation which he could not waste time analyzing what it was that he felt, as he was more concerned with both Iruka's injury and passing Kakashi's test. But then, the memories he had gotten that time had not been especially obvious that it had been from a clone. But that may be due to the fact that he fought mostly using his instincts, more so than studying and analyzing his opponent. The clones simply didn't use their brain as much, and the clarity and usefulness of the information was not quite as apparent. He also suspected that at the time he might have confused the extra memories with his own. This may be because both the clones and himself had been entirely focused on a mutual goal. And clones that perform an entirely independent action to the original should make the memories much more apparent that it had originated from a clone. Deciding to consult the texts to confirm his suspicion, Naruto picked out the scroll on the table that labeled, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu and related jutsu. The blonde demon container unrolled the scroll and quickly browsed through the contents. He had been right. The Kage Bunshin did have the side effect of the user learning everything the clone had. As he continued to read, the wider his eyes became. He was in awe at the usefulness of the jutsu. Since the scroll he held in his hands was from the genin level restricted section of the archive, it did not contain the hand signs and actual training methods for the jutsu. But there was still a fairly in-depth summary of what the technique can do and the ways it could be used. There was also some information on related jutsus. Naruto pondered whether to take advantage of the information-gathering capabilities of the jutsu. It felt a little like he was cheating by studying with clones. But the blonde-haired boy quickly dismissed the thought. After all, they were ninja, not samurai and swordsmen. Ninja used any means necessary to become stronger. The word honor shouldn't even exist in a ninja's vocabulary. Deciding to take advantage of the information-gathering capabilities of the jutsu, Naruto summoned 20 clones once again. Naruto quickly formed the seal and once again summoned 20 clones, which he ordered to pick a scroll from the table and start reading. By the time Naruto had finished reading the scroll on Kage Bunshin, it was already 6 in the evening. He rolled up the scroll in his hand and placed it on the table in front of him. Naruto looked around him and found that 8 of his clones had finished reading their scroll. Being impatient as ever, Naruto immediately dispersed the clones that had finished reading, and a rush of information once again flowed into his mind along with a mild headache. Naruto shook his head as if trying to shake the pain away, only for him to make the pain more severe. So he simply sat still in his seat and waited till he felt better. He made a note to disperse the clones one at a time, when the rest of the clones finished reading. By the time the pain was gone, the rest of the clones were done reading their scroll. This time, Naruto dispersed the 12 remaining clones one by one, 30 seconds apart, and he was relieved that he did not develop a headache again. Naruto spent the next several minutes replacing the scrolls he had read to where he had gotten them. Then he returned to where he sat before and reviewed everything he had learnt from the texts. From the scroll he had found on Kage Bunshin, he had learned that the technique evenly distributes a user's chakra between clones. The clones disperse after a single hit. Naruto concluded that the clones would be most effective when they don't get hit. This would mean that his clones either should attack from a range using weapons and ninjutsu or engage in taijutsu without getting hit. Naruto made a mental note to train in speed and dodging exercises. He also thought that using ninjutsu with clones to take advantage of the divided chakra supply in each clone would be a good idea. After some thinking, he also realized that if overwhelming numbers are to be used to wear an opponent out, then summoning a large number in one go would be more efficient than summoning the same number of clones in successive smaller groups at a time, as each clone would have a larger average chakra supply in the larger group. The accompanying jutsu for the Kage Bunshin were also very interesting to Naruto. He could easily see the usefulness and versatility of the Shuriken Kage Bunshin. While he did not know how to perform the technique, he believed that he could recreate it using a mixture of Kage Bunshin, henge, and some trial and error. And the description of Bunshin Daibakua simply made Naruto drool. Exploding clones. It would be devastating if he could learn it. Unfortunately, the scroll did not contain any more detail on the jutsu apart from it being clones that explode and nothing on the inner workings of the jutsu. Naruto was not discouraged, however, and decided that he would spend some time doing trial and error tests to learn how to make his clones explode. Perhaps he had to make the chakra in his clones unstable somehow. He had also read the basics of chakra and the composition of body energy and spiritual energy. He decided that further research should be done on this topic, as he believed that different jutsu required different compositions of each energy type. Taijutsu obviously related more to body energy, and genjutsu a larger composition of spiritual energy, and ninjutsu likely a more even balanced composition of both. If he were correct, then isolating and utilizing the pure form would be more efficient in some cases. And it would be likely that he would become impervious to most genjutsu if he could utilize spirit energy in its purest form. But it was still merely a theory, and he had yet to prove or disprove his hypothesis. The scroll's taijutsu training methods he found revealed that weighted clothing was an effective way to improve strength and speed in relatively short amounts of time, though it places the most strain on the body. It was a method rarely used since the likelihood of injury is exceptionally high, making the training unproductive for most people. Naruto gathered that getting himself some weights while doing lots and lots of running as well as physical conditioning exercises was a good direction for training if he wanted to get strong quick. He had also picked out some low-level jutsu that he could learn. He memorized the hand seals and training method for the Kaden, Hausenka no Jutsu, Kaden, Gukaku no Jutsu, and Shunshin no Jutsu for later. The blonde resolved that he would practice the jutsus as soon as he can. But first, it was getting late, and he was hungry. It was time for some ramen. When Naruto arrived at the bridge the next morning, his teammates had already arrived. Sakura was as usual pestering the raven-haired boy for a date with no success. On force of habit, Naruto moved to greet Sakura. But he quickly caught himself mid-stride, before approaching silently and standing slightly away from the other two. Naruto grimaced slightly as he realized that giving up on Sakura was harder than he thought. He had to actively watch what he did so he would not fall back onto old habits. He decided that he should stay as inconspicuous as possible and talk as less as possible, so he won't revert to fawning over Sakura. Naruto leaned against a post and looked towards his teammates. Sasuke looked at him and raised his eyebrows a little. Naruto shrugged at him. The Uchiha scoffed and turned away uncaring. To him, no matter how Naruto dressed, it wouldn't make him any less of a doby. Sakura gave Sasuke a confused look before looking around her. Sakura's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Naruto's new look. She had to admit that it was a big improvement from before. In fact, he even looked good. Not that she would ever admit to thinking that. But what shocked her was that it seemed like the blonde had arrived for a while, and yet he did not pester her like usual, nor was he as loud as usual. The boy simply had ignored her. Sakura wondered what had brought on the change and remembered what had happened the day before. She felt guilty for being so harsh. While she did not feel guilty for turning down Naruto, she felt bad for being excessively harsh. Even if she did have a bad day, it was no reason to take it out on him. You look different today, why the sudden change? Sakura finally broke the silence. Naruto swallowed the words that were about to blurt out unthinkingly, before he shrugged and just replied. Just felt like it was time for a change. Sakura. He inwardly berated himself, as he had to once again force himself not to be quiet and not to brag. Sakura on the other hand winced and felt a pang in her chest for reasons she did not understand. For all the time she had known Naruto, he had always called her Sakura-chan. Even though she had wished that he stopped calling her that, now that he did, she felt strangely disappointed. Things stayed silent between the team members after that exchange, although Sakura did occasionally snuck concern-filled glances at the blonde. 2 hours later Kakashi arrived to the site of the team quietly waiting for once. Yo! Kakashi looked at Naruto, who had always been the loudest of the group, whom surprisingly did not comment on his tardiness. His single exposed eye widened in surprise as he took in his blonde-haired student's new look. If not for his mask, one would be able to see his jaw dropping and mouth gaping. Naruto looked like his sensei. He wondered briefly whether it was purely a coincidence the boy looked so much like the Yondaime or not. Kakashi quickly regained his composure as he saw the expectant look on Naruto's face. It surprised him even more as Naruto would usually be yelling like a hyperactive child by now. He didn't know whether the sudden change was a good thing or not, so he quickly focused on business and decided to just observe Naruto for now. Well, team, we have a mission to get to. Naruto was pleased to find that his intense training was paying off. Even though it had only been 2 weeks since he had started, he could feel that he was improving at a rapid rate. Naruto noticed that as time went past, the frequency of Sakura being on his mind became less and less. And the tendency to fall back to doting over her was beginning to fade. And although he knew he had potential to become a good ninja, he never knew that he was capable of improving so much just by being focused on training. But the result speaks for itself. His progress had been more than he had hoped. Each day, he would wake up extra early to run laps around Konoha to build up his speed, after a light breakfast. He had started on body weights at 10 kilograms on each limb, which he concealed underneath his clothing, and it was steadily increasing. He would continue the running until it was time for team meeting. Afterwards, the team would complete a day of D-rank missions or team training. They would then be dismissed at around 3 in the afternoon if there were no team training. Naruto would then find some food for lunch before moving to the forests on the outskirts of Konoha to train. He would then spend 4 hours purely on ninjutsu, which he trained in while using as many kage bunshin as he could summon to help him learn jutsu. He would stop for dinner and allow for a short break in order for the food to settle. After which, he would return to the forest to do physical training. Each night, he would push himself to the limit by doing countless push-ups, sit-ups, squats and other exercises to the point of exhaustion. In a mere 2 weeks, he had learned the Shunshin no Jutsu and both Kaden Jutsus he had picked out. He had also figured out the Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu quickly. The Bunshin Daibakua, however, gave Naruto the most trouble. Many hours were taken just to experiment ways that could make clones explode. He believed that he was starting to find clues as to how to detonate his Kage Bunshin. Still, he was not entirely satisfied with his progress, as he wanted to be able to master the techniques he learnt. This meant that he would not be satisfied until he could not only perform jutsu instantaneously, but also without hand seals. While it is nearly impossible to do higher-level jutsu without hand seals, most of the jutsu he knew were fairly simple and require few hand seals. So far, he had learned to do the kawarimi and henge without hand signs. Once he had gotten to that point, Naruto knew he was ready to proceed to the next level of training. With some more time, he had no doubt that he would be able to master everything he had learnt. And his physical conditioning depended on how fast his body adapts to the weights he wore. Having no idea how to move on to the level, Naruto decided that more research was in order. And he returned to the archive again for inspiration. Naruto sighed disappointedly as he rolled up the scroll he had just read. He had thought that researching the strongest ninja of Konoha, namely the Hokage, would give him much inspiration for his training. But disappointingly, the information he found didn't help him as much as he had hoped. Each Hokage had mostly used skills and jutsu unknown to anyone else or used jutsu that was not genin level. Naruto had then stumbled across the mention of the legendary Sannin due to their association with the third and fourth Hokage. The information on Orochimaru and Jiraiya had not been useful as they too, predominantly used high-level ninjutsu. Now that he had finished up on reading 2 of the 3 Sannin, Naruto hoped that the scrolls on Tsunade would help further his training. He was pleasantly surprised to find the scroll on the last Sannin to be a gold mine of useful information. While he could not make sense of the jutsu Tsunade used such as the Ranshinsho and the high-level Sozo Seisei, which were heavily based on high-level medical knowledge, he did find her superhuman strength particularly interesting. Naruto knew that his fighting style had never been about grace. Rather, he relied on brute strength and unpredictability. It was a bad way to fight and he knew it, as he was nothing more than a common brawler that had better strength, speed and reflex. But a technique such as this could easily offset his weakness in his taijutsu. The notion of ending fights quickly and decisively with one super-powered punch made him incredibly excited. The description on the technique in the scrolls had been surprisingly detailed. Though Naruto supposed that it was because it was not expected that the technique could be replicated, as perfect chakra control was needed. Naruto pieced together some of the clues for him to recreate the technique. He knew after reading on the basics of chakra that he had chakra reserves well above the average ninja. Naturally, it had the drawback of causing his chakra control to be poor. And he knew that even with years of training, perfect control would be beyond him. He did not feel discouraged, however. He would simply have to do what he did best. Adaptation. He was known for sudden, unexpected, ingenious thinking and extreme adaptability. Modifying techniques on a whim is something that came easy for him. The Warroke no Jutsu had been a product of this. After all, it was merely an application of the Henge no Jutsu, yet the effectiveness of the jutsu itself against perverts could not be denied. And in this case, Naruto had a vague idea on how to replicate the technique. He believed that he could compensate chakra control with overwhelming amounts of chakra, which he had an abundance of. The original technique involved releasing a significant amount of chakra focused onto a single point released from multiple tenketsu points with perfect timing. Theoretically, he could recreate a similar effect by using excessive amounts of chakra. It wouldn't completely mimic the original technique, of course, as it would definitely be weaker than the original. But if it worked like he believed, then it would still be devastating in a fight. He moved out to the training grounds to test his theory. But when he tested it by gathering large amounts of chakra into his fists for a punch, most of it simply bled off, wasting most of the power. His timing by releasing chakra from several tenketsu was also not simultaneous, and neither could he perfectly focus into a single point. Successive attempts ended the same and with no visible improvement every time. The result was just like any other chakra-enhanced punch. Naruto came to the conclusion that his control simply wasn't good enough even when the technique had been modified. Naruto lifted his legs slightly from the water below him, and placed it back onto the surface. When his sandal touched the water, he noticed that he no longer created ripples in the water where he made contact. He took this as a sign that he had finally mastered the water walking. He decided to test his mastery by walking, then eventually running across the surface of the water. Again, no ripples. Naruto smiled proudly to himself. He had surprised himself with how quickly he had mastered the water walking. It had taken him several days to finally master tree walking before he moved on to the water walking. During that time, he had postponed most of his other training so he could complete the control exercise. And while it had taken a few days to learn tree walking, water walking had only taken him several hours. But now that he had gotten his control to a satisfactory level, it was time to get back to his normal schedule. He had no time to waste, as he had to make up for the last few days. He walked out of the small lake he had been training atop and moved towards a backpack that lay on the ground not too far from edge of the lake. Naruto set himself onto the ground before unzipping the bag. He pulled out several small pieces of metal from the bag and set them on the ground. He then slid the sleeve of his white coat to his elbows, revealing a small pouch that was tied to his forearm over his blue long sleeve top. He opened the pouch, which was sewn with separate compartments. He inserted the pieces of metal into the pouches on both arms before strapping them back onto his arm. He did the same for the weights he hid under his pant legs. He made sure the added weight on each limb was the same. Naruto slowly stood up, straining slightly from the weight. He now wore 20 kilograms per limb. While that was not a lot of weight when he used chakra to enhance his muscles, he could barely move when he didn't. And the purpose of the weights was to build up his muscles. According to the scrolls he had read, he was progressing with body weights much more quickly than the average person. He had also noticed his incredible recovery rate after he found that he wasn't as tired as he should be after an especially intense night of training. And interestingly, the more severe the damage was to his body, the faster he healed. As he had noticed that the harsher his training was, the less muscle pains he felt the next day. It was undoubtedly the influence of Kyuubi, although he wouldn't be complaining any time soon as it allowed him to get accustomed to his weights that much quicker. Breaking temporarily from his thoughts, Naruto moved to a large wooden post and began to throw punch after punch at the post from each arm alternately. His stomach rumbled slightly, which distracted him slightly, but he forcefully suppressed his hunger. It was not yet time to think about food. He would hunt for some food later. He remembered that he had recently begun hunting for food, so he could hone his survival and tracking skills. Naruto also noticed his increasing appetite, which was also a reason he decided to hunt. His budget simply didn't allow him to eat the amount he was currently eating. At least not without sacrificing other things. He thought jokingly that he could probably out-eat an Akimichi. Sakura snuck another glance at her blonde teammate as the team walked towards the Hokage Tower to report the success of their latest mission. It had been a month after Team 7 officially began and 3 weeks after Naruto's sudden change. While she didn't speak a word of it, she was somewhat perturbed. This Naruto just didn't seem like the Naruto that she knew. Although in the back of her mind, she wondered whether she really knew him at all. Feel eyes on him, Naruto turned to them, finding Sakura glancing intently at him. What is it, Sakura? Sakura's frown furrowed. This was one of the many changes the blonde had undergone. He hadn't once called her Sakura-chan since he arrived at their meeting place that day 3 weeks ago. She didn't understand why, but she was sad that he was no longer doting on her, and she even missed hearing his affectionate call of Sakura-chan. Though she knew she was selfish. Having Naruto fight to gain her attention was a great boost to her ego, especially considering she did not have good self-esteem when she was younger. She quickly battered the thought aside. Why should she be sad whether he called her Sakura-chan or not? It was Sasuke that she loved. Right. Nothing. Sakura quickly answered. Naruto raised his eyes curiously at her nervousness, but just shrugged it off. This was another thing that troubled Sakura. Before his change, Naruto would most likely continue to pester her until either she revealed what it was that bothered her, or until she started to beat him up for annoying her. But these last few weeks, while he remained friendly towards her, Naruto no longer seemed to go out of his way to gain her attention. At times, he was even quiet. Sure, he still joked around and participated in conversations and was generally talkative, but for a lack of better word, she could say he no longer seemed like he was hyperactive. She didn't really know what to think about his changes. The more she looked at him, the more she found the previously unattractive boy to be better looking, with the way his hair now fell over his forehead, his slight gain in height, and especially that aura of determination that surrounded him. Where previously, if Naruto had boasted that he would become Hokage, people would laugh at him. But with that new aura of confidence and determination now, if he said that, she would almost be inclined to believe him. And now that he no longer acted like he was a child on sugar high, Sakura noticed that he was much more likable. And that alone worried her. Sakura quickly put these thoughts aside for the moment, and decided that convincing Sasuke to go on a date with her was much more important. Meanwhile, Kakashi was contemplating the mystery that was Naruto. Even though he had his face in his book as they walked, his thoughts were elsewhere. It had been 3 weeks since the boy had suddenly changed. He had become much quieter and much more contemplative. While the boy was still somewhat talkative and cheery, one could see that there was something much deeper to the boy beneath the surface. That wasn't a problem in itself. In fact, he was happy to see the boy starting to mature and began to take his job as a ninja much more seriously. However, there seemed to be a growing tension between the team, or rather between Sakura and Naruto. It was subtle and barely noticeable, but his observation skills were top-notch. The masked Junin stole a quick glance out of his single exposed eye at Sakura, who was walking ahead of him. On the surface, the girl seemed to be talking to Sasuke animatedly, who ignored her. But looking underneath, he perceived that the girl's mind seemed to wander from time to time. Even her actions seemed to be running on autopilot. The things she said seemed to be things she often said on habit. After studying the girl for some time, Kakashi suspected that the cause had been the Kyuubi vessel. Kakashi looked out of the corner of his eye at said blonde who walked next to him with his hands in his pockets. Kakashi's sweat dropped a little as the boy seemed to be completely oblivious to the going-ons of the team. And he was not sure what the vacant look on the blonde's face meant. It looked like he was daydreaming or deep in thought. But as he reviewed the team's performance in his mind, he did not discover anything that hindered their teamwork. In fact, the productivity and efficiency of the team had increased ever since Naruto had stopped constantly whinging about their missions. And while the team wasn't quite bonding as well as he had hoped, they worked fairly well as a team and their teamwork was steadily improving with every training session and completion of a mission. So it was for this reason that the copy nin decided that Naruto's change was not a cause for concern. At least not yet. The most he could do now was continue to observe his team. So, Kakashi merely returned to reading his favorite book. Beside Kakashi, Naruto was contemplating the results of his training in the last several weeks. In less than a month he had possibly made more progress than all the years he spent in the academy. It was all because he was now much more focused and hardworking. He knew that he wasn't a genius. Skills did not come to him as naturally as it did for others. On the other hand, he recognized that he also had a lot of latent potential. Potential that had been going to waste, and was now only recently being uncovered. He knew that, as learning a high-level jutsu like the Kage Bunshin in a span of several hours would be considered close to impossible. His natural speed had increased significantly. He suspected that he was nearing his teammate Sasuke's level, although he didn't know how much his teammate had kept hidden. And he also now had several useful ninjutsu in his arsenal. But there was still a large flaw in his abilities. While his ninjutsu was improving steadily, his taijutsu skills were still unrefined and would be considered below average at best. While he was likely to win against Sakura in a taijutsu match, whom although was much more graceful than he, she would still lose if only because of his higher level of strength and speed and more importantly, his ability to absorb large amounts of damage. He knew all the basics of taijutsu, like how to properly throw a punch, as well as an assortment of different types of strikes using different body parts. But he knew if he were to become a better fighter he would need to refine his style. He summed up that his weakness was the lack of grace and precision. The scrolls on Tsunade had given him some ideas. Although he was not interested in the occupation of a medic nin, he did find some of their abilities to be useful and applicable in his case. If he learned where to strike to cause maximum damage, he would improve drastically. Considering medic nins rarely engage in straight-out combat, they rarely used ninjutsu, opting for taijutsu to conserve chakra for when medical ninjutsu was needed to heal. Their taijutsu style was interesting as it revolved around avoiding attacks until the perfect opportunity arises, with which they would counter-attack using precise strikes to high-damage areas of the anatomy or pressure points to quickly end the fight with the least amount of effort. Without medic training, he would not be able to use the Shozen Jutsu to cut a person's muscle fibers. But the use of pressure points seemed to be a good idea. He had researched all taijutsu styles in Konoha that revolved around precision strikes. The Juken had come up several times. Unlike the Hyuga clan, he could not see Tenketsu without the Byakugan. And since the Tenketsu location varies from person to person, he would never be able to use the Juken. But unlike Tenketsu points, which are related to the chakra circulatory system, pressure points are related to the nervous system of the body, and thus are in roughly the same position in different people depending on their size. He could theoretically be able to locate the same pressure point on different people if he had the knowledge and skill to do so. And if he could do so, he could cause similar results as the Juken using pressure points. It was a good direction to improve his taijutsu, and he planned to use all of his ideas to create a new style that suited him. It would have to be devastatingly fast, takes advantage of the body's mechanics but most importantly, completely unpredictable. But he had filed the thoughts away as he noticed that his team had arrived at the tower. They arrived outside the Hokage's office. Naruto stood aside slightly to allow the rest of his team to enter the room first. He then entered behind them. He cursed under his breath when he accidentally banged his elbow on the doorframe. The rest of his team and the Hokage stared at him in amusement, Kakashi in particular. He glared slightly at his sensei, who was looking at him with an amused look. Bastards. Laughing at his misfortune. And it hadn't been the first time today either. He had stubbed his foot several times and banged elbows against random objects that he tried to avoid but still somehow seemed to collide with. Kakashi on the other hand was amused with his student. He was sure the boy had yet to realize that his sudden clumsiness was due to a small growth spurt. The blonde was oblivious to it, but he had grown almost an inch in the last several weeks. Kakashi shook his head slightly and turned to face the Hokage. Hokage-sama, Hitaki Kakashi and Team 7, here to report, mission completed. The masked Junin dismissed the team for the day after the report. Naruto took that as a cue to return to his training. After bidding his teammates goodbye, he revisited the archives to read up on anything that could help him create his new fighting style. He would have to memorize and find a large number of pressure points. But that would not be much of a problem if he used Kage Bunshins to learn. Not only could he use them to help memorize the locations, he could practice locating the points on his clones and experiment with the effects of the points without adverse effects to himself. The problem was increasing his accuracy and more importantly, learning how to channel chakra into a finger and into the enemy. Naruto spent the next 2 hours reading and learning as much as he could about pressure points before packing up his reading material and moving to a training area. Once he arrived at his training ground, he created a mass of 50 clones. He then sent half of those to practice in finding and hitting pressure points. He then commanded the rest of the clones to continue recreating Tsunade's super strength technique. After all the clones had spread out to different areas of the training ground to train, Naruto focused his thoughts on creating the technique. He lifted his hand and clenched his fist tightly. He closed his eyes in concentration and molded some chakra and directed it to his fist, feeling the warmth of the energy moving through his arm and accumulating at the fist. After he felt that he had collected a suitable amount of chakra, he opened his eyes abruptly and thrust his fist into the ground. A loud thud made way to his ears, but what he saw did not please him. Even though he had improved his chakra control by leaps and bounds, this was all he had been capable of. There was a fairly deep imprint of his fist where it made contact. The ground around the print was cracked slightly. There was no doubt his punching strength had improved from before significantly due to an improved ability to channel chakra to enhance his punch. But the result of the punch was far from impressive. He tried it again with more chakra. The result was still the same with only a slightly deeper imprint. The boy huffed in annoyance. No matter how much he tried, the technique seemed to be out of his reach. With his control much better than before, significantly less power bled away. But his timing and focus was still nowhere close to good enough. If only he could release his chakra from a single tenketsu then multiple like tapping pressure points with his finger. Naruto froze, and then blinked. A smirk slowly developed on his face. If what he was thinking worked like he wanted, then his next attempt will be significantly more powerful than the last. Naruto lifted his right hand in front of him once again and curled the fingers like a fist except leaving his index finger extended. He once more closed his eyes so he could concentrate chakra through his arms and into his hand. But this time he focused all of it into the tip of his index finger. When he decided he had collected enough chakra, he thrust the finger into the ground beside the small imprint he had created earlier. The results were just like he had anticipated. The ground trembled slightly and a small crater 10 feet across formed around him with his finger at the center. Cracks emanated past the crater and extended for another several feet. Naruto smiled slightly at his achievement. The chakra this time was much more focused, and since it came from a single tenketsu, his timing was perfect. But it had its own drawbacks as he had channeled chakra into one tenketsu, rather than multiple tenketsu. It takes more time to charge up the required amount of chakra than the original technique. And added to that, a finger thrust naturally had less power than a punch. Yet, with more practice, he would be able to generate large amounts of chakra quickly into his finger to further offset the drawbacks. He also figured that if he improved the power in his fingers, the power of his technique would also increase much proportionately. And the good thing about it was that he was essentially doing the prerequisite training for striking pressure points. After another month of training, Naruto had more than doubled his weights. His progress in developing a new taijutsu style was also going well. He found that using clones as training dummies was a great advantage. He had become fairly proficient with striking pressure points during combat after he spent some time sparring with Kage Bunshin as practice. It had become a habit now for him to participate in a mass free-for-all taijutsu sparring match with a big group of clones. As a result, his striking aim was much better, and he would be able to hit pressure points occasionally. His finger strength had also improved much, although it was not without mishaps. He had jarred his fingers several times earlier on when he practiced without chakra enhancement. He had healed quickly enough and corrected his earlier mistakes. He found the trick was to keep his fingers slightly bent rather than perfectly straight like he first thought. He had also begun to incorporate locks and grappling into his style after he read as much as he could about the human anatomy and skeletal structure and joints. He still needed to work the kinks out of the style, which would take months more of work even with Kage Bunshin, but despite that, his skill had improved significantly. Naruto then reviewed the profiles of all the strong ninja of Konoha, and came to the conclusion that the strongest ninja often had their own special attack ninjutsu or style of fighting. The Shodai had Mokuten Jutsu, Nadaime specialized in water jutsu, and the Yondaime had the Hiraishin no Jutsu and Rasengan. This led him to believe that if he were to become an exceptional ninja that was better than the rest, he would also need to create his own special ultimate attack. He had a vague idea as to what he wanted to create, but he put it as a side project so it would not hamper his training. After reviewing the training he had undergone, he realized that he had focused primarily on ninjutsu and taijutsu. He quickly realized that genjutsu posed a great problem to him as he could neither cast nor fight against them. He spent some time reading on the basics of genjutsu and quickly realized the endless possibilities and potential of the discipline. He even had some ideas of his own that he wanted to try. But unlike ninjutsu, he could not put the knowledge he had gathered from scrolls to practice. As genjutsu had never been an area that he was good at, he needed someone to teach him rather than learning from a scroll. His first thought was to approach Kakashi-sensei, but decided after some thinking, not to do so. The masked Junin was a lazy man. Not only did his sensei not train his team as intensely as he had liked, almost all of the training revolved around teamwork, ninja etiquette, and field combat simulations. While these are all lessons that are important, physical training are few and far in between. Ninjutsu training was practically non-existent as Kakashi mostly helped them refine their existing abilities. Plus, the man was not the genjutsu type. Kakashi was unlikely to be able to teach him what he needed to know for him to create his own genjutsu. He was better off finding a genjutsu specialist to teach him what he wanted to know. The only genjutsu expert he was aware of was Yuichi Kurenai. He had remembered her from when he was still in the academy. Unlike most other academy teachers, she had been nice to him. Too bad she had only taught subjects for Kunoichi until she left the academy to become a Junin. Last he'd seen her was when she came to pick up her genin team from his class of graduates. Naruto wasn't sure where to find her nor did he know how to approach her. He barely knew her name as it was. So he decided to just keep an eye out for her while he continued with other aspects of his training. Naruto breathed a weary sigh as he walked down the streets of Konoha. The day of D-ranked missions had been exhausting. The sheer boringness of the missions seemed to wear him down quicker than usual. He was certainly relieved and glad he was finally dismissed for the day. Something about his team bothered him though. Or more specifically, Sakura did. He had noticed that his pink-haired teammate had been acting somewhat strange lately while in his presence. He had tried to observe the girl, but never managed to understand her recent behavior. She would occasionally sneak glances at him, but when he would voice his concern, she denied that there was anything wrong. And she would always look away when he met her glances. He did not know what it meant and what caused it. He was certain it was not due to his growth in power. He had yet to show anyone on his team his true strength. It wasn't because he was trying to hide his strength from his team, but it was simply because he never needed to show any kind of skill in D-ranked missions. But then, while it puzzled him, he didn't feel that it was especially important. At least not at the moment. Like he had for most days, he had bid his team goodbye and was about to head out for his daily training after he went home for some training equipment. He certainly wasn't expecting to find Kurenai coming out of Konoha's best dango shop with a female companion. He easily recognized the genjutsu specialist from the distinctive bandage-like red and white clothing she wore. He did not recognize her companion though. He had never met a woman before. She was an attractive woman with purple hair tied up in a bunch with some of her hair sticking up at odd angles. Naruto judged her to be several years or so younger than the genjutsu specialist and wore a tan-colored coat over a fishnet undershirt. He took in a breath and quickly thought to himself whether to approach Kurenai or not. He decided that this was probably the best chance for him to approach Kurenai for training. He let the breath out and immediately called out to the woman before she got too far away. Kurenai-sensei. The red-eyed beauty paused in her walk and turned her head to the source of the call. Her eyes widened slightly when her eyes made contact with the boy whom was waving to get her attention. My god, he looks just like the Yondaime. Kurenai blushed faintly as she reminisced her younger days when she had a crush on the blonde Hokage. It was hard not to like the Yondaime. He was a great man, kind, strong and good-looking. He had many of the traits that she looked for in a man. though her crush was short-lived as it had ended when the man had died defeating the Kyuubi. Simply looking at the boy brought back flashes of memories of Yondaime. She pushed those memories to the back of her mind, content in letting the past remain in the past. After all, a crush was just that. A crush. She turned and straightened herself and watched as the boy slowly approached them. She focused her deep red eyes onto the boy and took in a better look. She instantly recognized the blonde-haired boy as the Kyuubi container despite the change of clothing. Curiosity flashed within her mind as she wondered what business the boy had with her. She had seen him several times when she still taught at the academy. She had heard about the boy from her colleagues, but she never knew him personally. Naruto looked up into Kurenai's piercing red eyes as he approached. Beautiful. He couldn't help but to think. It was perhaps one of the most beautiful sets of eyes he had ever seen. Not only because of the exotic shade of red of her eyes, which gave her an aura of mysteriousness and intrigue, but also because of the underlying warmth in her eyes that betray the cold, dispassionate image that she tried to portray with her indifferent expression. He could easily see the kind, caring nature of the woman underneath. And it made her all the more attractive. Naruto couldn't help but be mesmerized. "You're Naruto-kun, right?" He blinked, finally breaking eye contact. He quickly regained his bearings and hastily filtered through his mind her question, having almost missed it. Even as her question finally sank in, he could only nod dumbly at her, not knowing what to say. He could feel his face heating up and he tried desperately to hide his blush by looking at the ground. The shyness of the boy almost brought a smile to Kurenai's face, though she quickly hid it. He almost reminded her of her student Hinata. "So, how can I help you, Naruto-kun?" Kurenai asked, breaking the silence. Feeling the warmth in his cheeks starting to fade, he looked back up at her face. Unsure how to phrase his request, Naruto brought his hand up to the back of his head in habit and scratched a few times. Kurenai smiled slightly at the gesture, and the cute expression on the boy's face when he was trying to think. Kurenai-sensei, you are a genjutsu specialist, right?" Naruto finally questioned. Kurenai smiled proudly and nodded at the boy's question. It had been her dream to become Konoha's foremost genjutsu specialist. She had achieved her dream after many years of hard work, and she was extremely proud of her achievement. Can you teach me genjutsu?" Naruto asked with an embarrassed grin on his face while scratching his head. Kurenai raised an eyebrow curiously to his request. "Isn't your sensei supposed to teach you? Kakashi should be your sensei if I'm correct." "Yeah, but Kakashi-sensei hasn't really been teaching us any jutsus. And all he's been teaching is teamwork and what to do in different situations. He spends more time teaching Sasuke anyways," Naruto argued. Kurenai frowned slightly. She had always known that Kakashi was lazy, but from the sound of it, he really hasn't been training his team as much as he should have been doing. And having once been an academy instructor, his laziness and favoritism grated on her nerves. Even now with her team, she taught each of her students equally despite being much closer to Hinata than Kiba or Shino. But while she had no problem specifically with teaching Naruto, as she had never thought of him as the Kyuubi, she didn't want to interfere with another Junin's team. "You're better at genjutsu, right? So won't you be able to teach me genjutsu better than Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto quipped, trying to convince the woman by complimenting her. Kurenai couldn't deny the truth in that statement. She was definitely more knowledgeable in genjutsu than the copy ninja. Still, she did not wish to interfere with Kakashi's team no matter how bad a teacher he may be. Still seeing the look of hesitation on her face, Naruto decided to use one of his more devastating jutsu in his arsenal. Its power is devastating to women, and on par if not exceeding the power of the infamous Waroke no Jutsu. Puppy Eyes no Jutsu, please, and with that he activated the quivering lips of the technique. Kurenai stared at the boy with wide eyes and sweat dropped slightly. Though she had to suppress her female instinct and the urge to hug the boy who looked so incredibly cute. So cute. Well, It's not like teaching him genjutsu is that bad, right? Besides, it's true I could teach him genjutsu better than Kakashi. And none of my team shows any interest in learning genjutsu, she thought. Alright, she finally answered. The look of delight on Naruto's face and the sincere smile that formed on his face warmed her heart. Kurenai couldn't help but find his smile contagious and smiled in return. My team doesn't have training or missions on Thursdays and Saturdays after 4 p.m. We can train at Training Ground 8 at these times. Naruto quickly searched his memory and recalled that these times did not clash with his team schedule. So he nodded. Then, on impulse, he lifted her hand from her side and planted a soft kiss on the back of her hand. He gave the raven-haired woman another smile of gratitude and bid her farewell before walking away to his training. As he walked, he wondered what had compelled him to do what he just did. Why did I do that? I don't want her to take it the wrong way, he mused. Kurenai stood rooted to the spot she had been standing, blushing wildly. While she found it slightly embarrassing, it felt refreshing to be treated like a princess, rather than be looked at like a object. Ah, kawaii, what would everyone say if they knew you got so flustered by a 12-year-old? Her companion who had stood silently to the side throughout the entire exchange teased. Kurenai groaned. Anko. Thursday morning came around, and Team 7 as usual found themselves waiting for their teacher who was once again, late. Despite the annoyance that was Kakashi, Sakura found herself immensely curious to the reason for the excited and eager look on Naruto's face as the boy stared off into space while pacing back and forth impatiently along the bridge. Her eyes followed the boy as she tried to comprehend what made him so excited and impatient. The boy had become somewhat a mystery to her. With the changes he was going through, it was obvious to her that there was much more to Naruto than she had previously thought. And now that he no longer annoyed her, the more she spent with him, the more she realized that he had not been anywhere near as bad as she had previously made him out to be. She couldn't deny that Naruto was really a decent guy, now that he took things much more seriously. Not that she wanted him. To her, Sasuke was still better in every way. Meanwhile, Naruto continued his endless pacing as he waited for Kakashi to arrive. He was eager to get the missions done so he could train with Kurenai. He wasn't sure what made him feel so excited, all he knew was that he had never been so excited about genjutsu training before. Even his heart seemed to be beating faster as if willing the time to go quicker along with his heartbeat. What are you so happy about, Naruto? Sakura asked, finally unable to hold her curiosity. Nothing, Naruto chimed. Sakura narrowed her eyes slightly at him in suspicion, but did not press the issue. Feeling the girl's eyes still on him, Naruto turned to look at her and tilted his head slightly in question. Yes. Sakura blushed slightly at the boy's stare, finding the way he tilted his head to be incredibly cute. And oddly enough to her, it had not been the first time she thought Naruto was cute. With the way he had been growing physically, she found him to be more and more attractive every day. The blue-eyed genin had grown much during the last 2 months. Naruto had always been the shortest in their team, shorter than her by an inch or so. But now, he was almost as tall as she was. His hair had also grown in length, as he had not bothered to cut it. Sakura honestly thought that it suited him better and even made him look more mature. While she would never admit that to anyone, she did think that Naruto had changed from looking like a goofy loudmouth idiot to a fairly handsome boy. If the way he had been growing in the last 2 months were any indication, she wouldn't be surprised if he had girls all over him in a few years. And that thought irritated her for some reason. Naruto raised an eyebrow at Sakura's reaction and scratched his head curiously. There's that look again, but what does it mean? Come to think of it, she's not the only one that looks at me like that. I caught Ayame Onichan looking at me like that too. It's almost like how the fangirls look at Sasuke, nah. Naruto shook his head with some amusement. Sakura would never find him attractive, right? Especially since she made that quite clear. Not to mention cute girls like Ayame-chan. Naruto blinked. Cute. Since when did he start thinking of Ayame Onichan as cute? Not that it wasn't true. It was the opposite in fact. Ayame was a very cute girl. Beautiful even, although not quite as stunning as Kurenai-sensei. The Junin just had that charm and aura of mystique that captivates people. Not to mention that perfect face that you couldn't help but admire like a work of art. And that flawless creamy white skin, exotic wine red eyes that he could lose himself staring into, and that pair of velvety red lips that made him just want to kiss. Gah! Naruto instantly found himself blushing a deep shade of red and banged his head against a wooden post on the bridge to get the perverted images out of his head. He leaned his forehead against the post hiding his embarrassment. His teammates stared at him like he had just gone crazy, making him blush even more. What? He turned to his teammates still slightly flushed. Baka! Sasuke scoffed and looked away. Sakura gave him a curious look but eventually just shrugged and looked away. It was at this time that Kakashi arrived and distracted him from making more thoughts about the opposite. Yo! Kakashi greeted holding up a hand. Let's go get ourselves a mission. Kurenai leaned her back against a tree as she waited for Naruto to arrive. She shifted her body slightly as the bark of the tree dug into her back. She settled into a fairly comfortable position and let her mind wander. She contemplated to herself why she had agreed to teach the boy. Surely, it could not be because of that incredibly cute puppy-eyed look, no matter how adorable he looked at that moment. Perhaps it was because he reminded her of the Yondaime. Or perhaps she was simply curious about the Kyuubi container. She realized that she didn't really have an answer to the question. And she idly wondered what it would be like to teach Naruto. Although she had never personally taught the boy before, according to the rumor mill, he was a teacher's nightmare, what with his pranks and his terrible attitude towards his teachers. But then, he didn't seem as bad as those rumors said when he had approached her the other day. She really wasn't expecting the boy to have any talent in genjutsu considering his grades in the academy. After all, the barely graduated genin had been known as the dead last that had absolutely no talent in any of the ninja arts. Still, she fully expected him to at least put his best effort into the training to learn everything she would teach him. Kurenai shifted from her thoughts as she felt a presence enter the training grounds. "Hi Kurenai-sensei," Naruto called out in a friendly tone, blushing faintly as he recalled his thoughts earlier, in the morning. Kurenai just nodded at his greeting. "So what do you need help with?" Kurenai asked, calmly, getting straight to business. Naruto thought for a few seconds and scratched his head in an embarrassed manner. Everything really, but I definitely have to at least learn how to detect and dispel genjutsu. But I would like to learn some actual jutsu too. The red-eyed woman nodded. How about I teach you how to detect and dispel genjutsu, then let you practice by canceling some lower-level genjutsu that I'll cast on you. This way, you can get first-hand experience at dispelling and recognizing genjutsu. Naruto nodded enthusiastically and Kurenai smiled slightly at his enthusiasm. It was always nice to see a fellow ninja interested in her chosen art. The first step to detecting genjutsu is based on observation. Detecting genjutsu is the embodiment of the concept of looking underneath the underneath. It requires you to be able to notice anything out of the ordinary. Because of this, the higher level of detail in the genjutsu, the harder it is to detect. This is why normally people with higher intelligence have more aptitude in genjutsu. But if you have enough experience, you can compensate for a lack of natural talent. So before we do anything else, we'll work on your observation skills, Kurenai lectured. Naruto nodded for Kurenai to continue. I want you to observe and analyze what you can see about me. Tell me what you can observe of my personality and even fighting style and name my weaknesses and strengths. I'll do a short demonstration first so you'll know what to do. Hi. Your stance is solid even when you are standing around casually. So you are likely a taijutsu-oriented fighter and prefers straight-out combat. The way you constantly shift your weight between each leg tells me that you can react quickly to most situations. You might be concealing weapons underneath your sleeves. So avoid making contact with your arms unless with a weapon. But your coat is also quite loose and might be an advantage to grab onto it in a fight against you, Kurenai listed. Naruto simply stared at the red-eyed Junin in awe. He never imagined it was possible to know so much about a person's fighting style just from observing how a person looks and the way they stand. Now your turn. Naruto focused his eyes on the woman. He looked from her face down to her feet, then back up to her face again. You are a very beautiful woman. You could definitely use your looks to distract your enemies, Naruto spoke in an embarrassed tone. Kurenai waved her hand signaling for him to continue, while hiding a blush of her own. You probably prefer genjutsu and ninjutsu over taijutsu, since your body still has a very feminine shape and doesn't have large or very defined muscles. I think your taijutsu is also based on illusions. Most likely using your red sleeve to attract attention. Maybe even use the red color to disorient opponent by moving your arms really fast. And your clothes don't look like it'll give that much protection for combat. So you are likely to prefer stealth. I suppose your weakness is physical strength, so overpowering you in close combat is the best way to fight you. Kurenai was surprised. Considering how unobservant Naruto looked and seemed at times, his analysis of her abilities was quite accurate. Okay, Naruto, your observations are pretty good. But you don't seem to be very confident with your observation skills. So I want you to practice this skill everywhere you go for the next few weeks and analyze in your mind everyone you meet during that time. Try to look for skills, strengths, weaknesses and threat level. And try to analyze not only people, but also your surroundings and how to take advantage of your surroundings for a fight. Hi. Naruto nodded in understanding. Now, we'll move on to actually detecting and dispelling genjutsu using your observation skills. Genjutsu can affect all of your 5 senses. Your touch, smell, hearing, sight, and even taste. Kurenai was surprised. Considering Naruto's reputation as a hopeless ninja, the boy had been doing surprisingly well. It took the boy many tries to finally learn how to perform the dispel technique properly. But once he had gotten it down, he had been able to dispel all but one genjutsu she cast on him. Kurenai had to admit that whoever said the boy had no talent couldn't be any further from the truth. Sure, there were those that learned at a faster rate than Naruto, but for the boy to become as proficient at recognizing and dispelling genjutsu as he was right now in only one day was an impressive feat. I'm surprised you did so well, Naruto-kun. I didn't expect you to be able to cancel the last one. Now, before we finish for the day, I'll show you a low-level genjutsu and let you practice it on your own. This is a jutsu called Magen, Narakumi no Jutsu. Kurenai performed the required seals and cast the jutsu at Naruto. Naruto felt a gust of wind blow against him, before a cluster of leaves carried by the wind was blown around him, slightly disorienting his vision. A moment later, Naruto found that the leaves to have disappeared. Naruto looked around the training grounds and saw the figure of Kurenai stumbling out from behind some trees. Numerous kunai and shuriken pierced her body. She reached out to him with agony showing on her face, before collapsing to the ground. Naruto knew it was merely the product of an illusion, but the imagery still brought shivers down his spine. He quickly brought his hand into a seal. Kai. The bleeding figure shimmered and faded away to reveal a perfectly fine Kurenai standing several feet away. Kurenai nodded in approval. Now pay attention, here are the hand signs for the jutsu. Kurenai formed the seals with her hands slowly in order for Naruto to follow. Naruto formed the same seals with his own hands several times, and when he finally got it down, he nodded to Kurenai. Kurenai looked up at the sky to see it almost dark. Okay Naruto-kun, that's it for today. It's getting dark and I still have to get home and find something to eat. Kurenai-sensei, why don't you come to grab a bite to eat with me? Anywhere you like, my treat. Naruto asked. As thanks for training me. He added quickly. It was just an innocent expression of gratitude after all. He didn't want her to think he was trying to ask her out or anything. Although for some reason, he couldn't help but blush madly. Kurenai pondered it for a moment. She knew she would have ended up eating out anyways. She didn't feel up to cooking for the night, and getting a free meal sounded like a tempting offer. Not to mention that it didn't hurt to get to know her new student better. She was curious in the least. Everything she had heard about him from rumors had not been entirely accurate, if at all. Despite being dubbed talentless, he had learned to dispel genjutsu quickly. It was certainly a surprise, as she heard that he was supposedly hopeless in anything regarding genjutsu. And she was more than a little intrigued with his resemblance to the Yondaime. Certainly, the boy was like a mystery. A mystery that she would like to solve. Not to mention there was the added bonus that she could help Hinata win his heart if she knew the boy better. So, she nodded a yes. I've had a nice night. Thank you for having dinner with me, Kurenai-sensei. Naruto smiled softly at the red-eyed beauty. Kurenai smiled in response and agreed that she also had a great night. Naruto once again lifted her hand and gently placed a chaste kiss on her hand, then bid her farewell and left. Kurenai blushed faintly, half leaning against her opened apartment door. She watched him walk away, his cape billowing in the winds, making him seem almost regal. It seemed kind of strange, but the more she watched him, the more she saw the resemblance between Naruto and her former crush. Even the foxy grin the boy sported most of the time seemed to remind her of the Yondaime. She had immensely enjoyed the night. Even though neither of them had considered the night a date or anything even remotely related to a romantic sense, she couldn't help but wish that of the few dates she had ever been on, had been even half as nice as this night. She had never felt so relaxed with a person of the opposite. Not with her peers, her students, not even with her friend Sarutobi Asuma, who she had considered to be the closest match to what she considered decent boyfriend material. Although she did hate his smoking. She supposed that Naruto's age and his lack of ulterior motives helped. Most men her age only wanted her for her body. It was the reason why she always turned down any men that approached her. Although it was a little strange that she felt more relaxed around Naruto than even with Kiba and Shino. But then, the boy's cheery and somewhat playful persona reminded her almost of her friend Anko. She supposed that familiarity relaxed her. Not to mention the boy was naturally easygoing and always informal, which helped lower her guard. Kurenai entered her apartment and gently shut the door behind her. She plopped herself onto her couch and thought back to earlier in the night. After they had left the training ground, they had chosen a modest restaurant that was inexpensive, yet served decent food. They had conversed while they waited for their meal, and their conversations continued through the night. She had half expected the blonde to brag about himself and even his dream to become Hokage. She had seen it before when she still worked at the academy. But it was not so, and she found their talk much more interesting and meaningful. It began with mostly insignificant chatter about themselves. But that quickly turned into an animated discussion about genjutsu. It was certainly a shock for her to find the boy as knowledgeable as he was in the theories of genjutsu. He had certainly done his reading. Although the boy did admit he could not apply the knowledge to practice. Still, the ideas and theories he had simply fascinated her. Increasing the strength and efficiency of genjutsu by using a higher concentration of spiritual energy while a possibility, was something she had never thought of. She was excited of the possibilities of this theory. And it reignited her passion for the art of genjutsu. It was then that she realized that she had not once been as excited by genjutsu since she had been acknowledged as the best genjutsu specialist in Konoha, as she was now. She decided then and there, that she would help Naruto learn genjutsu as best as she could. As thanks for renewing her interest in her art. She thought that perhaps they could even explore the possibilities of his theories together once he had reached a reasonable level in the art of genjutsu. Their discussion continued even long after they had finished eating, and when they finally decided to leave, they realized they had been talking for much longer than they had expected. Afterwards, Naruto paid the bill and walked her home like a perfect gentleman. Overall, it was a very enjoyable night. She could understand why Hinata liked the young man. He was definitely more than he seemed at first glance. He was an interesting person, and very good company. In fact, she felt rather jealous of Hinata. Even if her student had yet to win his heart, she had discovered this hidden gem where nobody even bothered to look and already had her heart set on winning his love. Kurenai had yet to even find someone that she would even consider dating. Hinata would be a very lucky girl if she could gain Naruto's love. The boy had even made her feel special and appreciated through the night without really even trying to. She couldn't really explain it. It was simple things he did that came together. The way he pulled her chair out for her, the way he paid rapt attention to her even when she talked about insignificant things, walking her home, and especially the way he looked at her in awe when they talked about genjutsu. It was just things that he did without any motives other than to be nice. Things he did sometimes without thinking. It was why she felt relaxed around him. Naruto was unlike most men that tried their hardest to impress her. She could feel that Naruto was simply being his natural friendly self. She had never before imagined that Naruto would be such nice company. She had to re-establish her opinions of the boy, considering he was different to what she thought she knew of him. He was unlike all the rumors that described him. She found herself enjoying the night so much that she could hardly wait for their next training session together. Kurenai sighed wistfully. If only he was her age. And he was quite cute too. 2 days later, Naruto entered training ground 8 once again. When he realized Kurenai was nowhere to be found, he paused his step in suspicion. He looked around, his brows creased in concentration. Then he relaxed and smiled. The blonde raised his hands in front of him and formed a seal with his hands. Kai. Clapping resounded from behind him and he whirled around to see Kurenai looking proudly at him. Good job. You have really improved your genjutsu detection skills even after just one training session. Naruto blushed slightly from the praise and scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Feeling that he should show his new sensei his progress in the art of genjutsu, he cast the jutsu he had learned 2 days ago. In an instant, Kurenai realized that she was caught in the Narukumi no Jutsu. The leaves that swirled around her were a dead giveaway. She quickly dispelled the jutsu before looking at Naruto surprised. It wasn't the fact that he was able to perform the jutsu that truly surprised her. But it was rather the fact that she did not notice the boy making any hand seals at all. He was either able to perform hand seals faster than she could see, or he was able to create the jutsu without hand seals. It was practically impossible for someone to create hand seals without her even noticing their arms move when she was looking right at them, especially for someone at Naruto's level. But while the second option was more likely, it should still have taken him weeks if not months of practice to achieve that level, even if the jutsu was merely AD rank. How did you get so good in such a short time? You would have only gotten a day's worth of practice at most. Kurenai inquired with surprise in her voice. Naruto smirked and responded with 2 words. Kage Bunshin. Kurenai was perplexed. How would Kage Bunshin help? The memories of a clone will be transferred to me when it dispels. If I train with a large amount of clones all working on a single jutsu, I gain all the experience when they dispel. I can cut down the time I needed to master a jutsu since I can create over 100 at a time. Kurenai nodded in understanding and was impressed. Not only did the boy have a chakra reserve large enough to make 100 solid clones, but he also had a good understanding of the capability of the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Well, now that you are at a decent level in dispelling genjutsu and learned the Narukumi no Jutsu, we'll move on to harder stuff. Kurenai snuck a short glance at the boy walking beside her. Her opinion of the boy was getting better and better, the more she got to know him. It was rare to find someone as hardworking as he was. Considering how intense she trained her own team, she could even argue that Naruto trained as hard, if not even more intense than her team. Although she could also argue that it was partially due to his massive chakra potential and exceptional stamina. The sheer amount of chakra he had used to practice repetitively, a genjutsu she had taught him would have worn her out after just half an hour at most. And the boy did it endlessly without even a single break for 3 hours straight. Even when he was starting to tire, he did not stop. She had even had at one point started to worry that the boy would collapse from chakra exhaustion. She had ended the session soon after that just to be safe. Hey Kurenai, isn't he a little young for you? A voice teased. Kurenai stopped walking abruptly and turned to the sound of the voice, to see her friend Anko looking amusedly at her. We were just heading back from training, what are you doing here? Kurenai explained. Anko raised her eyebrows. I don't remember him being on your team. Anko then gave the genjutsu specialist a sly grin. Are you two really training? Or were you two doing something else? Kurenai blushed slightly at what the purple-haired woman was implying, but tried to brush off her teasing by changing the subject. So what are you doing here, Anko? The blush still adorning her face. Anko looked at the blushing Kurenai and then to the boy who was trying to hide his blush by looking away and making himself seem less noticeable. The Tokubetsu Junin smirked. So easy to tease. Just came to see if you wanna go grab some dango, she answered. Anko looked back to Naruto who was now looking seemingly out of place, before Kurenai could reply. So what's your name, kid? I'm Mitarashi Anko. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. So, Kurenai-chan, how about some dango? What about you, kid? You wanna come too? Naruto shrugged. Sure, but I don't want to impose. Don't worry, kid, I'm sure Kurenai won't mind. Anko turned to Kurenai and winked. Right. Kurenai blush returned to her face once again. She didn't even know why she was blushing so much. Although she agreed that she didn't mind the young man's company. Not to mention she thought it would be amusing to see Anko and Naruto interact, seeing they are quite similar in personality. The three entered the dango shop and got seated on an unoccupied table. Anko was about to catch the attention of the waiter so they could order when a less than quiet sneer was aimed at them. What a way to ruin the night. The damn snake bitch and the demon brat. Naruto, Kurenai and Anko frowned before looking in the direction of the voice. The voice belonged to an inebriated man who was glaring at them along with two other men that was given Anko and Naruto the same look. Why couldn't they just die? One of the other men murmured, to the agreement of his companions. Kurenai frowned and sent a glare with some killing intent at the men, shutting them up, before looking at Anko and Naruto worriedly. Anko seemed to have shrugged off the heated comment, and assumed a cheerful face. The purple-haired Tokubetsu Junin loudly called out an order of a massive batch of dango for the three of them, to the waiter. Anko hated this. She had never done anything to deserve the villagers' scorn. She had once been a respected kunoichi of the village, becoming hated and scorned, all because of one man. Orochimaru. Oh, how she loathed that name. Not only had he given her the cursed seal of heaven, then cast her away when he decided there was no more use for her, merely having once been his apprentice continues to haunt her both through the cursed seal and the contempt of the village passed on from teacher to apprentice. But there was nothing she could really do. And she really hated this helplessness. He was an S-ranked missing nin, and as much as she hated to say it, also her former sensei. He had taught her practically everything she knew. As much as she wanted revenge against him, she knew she was unlikely to ever get it. She could never be able to defeat the man with the very same techniques he taught her. All she could do was bear it all. But damned if she would let these bastards see how much it affects her. While Anko didn't seem to be affected by the men's insults, Naruto could easily see through her mask. He placed a hand on Anko's shoulder, catching the woman's attention. He looked into the woman's brown eyes and gave her a sad smile. For a brief moment, he let his own mask drop. The woman gasped softly, seeing his eyes full of pain and sadness. Eyes so similar to her own. In an instant, the sadness was gone, replaced by the same mask he always donned. Naruto flashed her a cheerful smile. He didn't know why those men hated her. But he could understand her pain. To be hated, to have their very existence scorned. He wanted her to know that he sympathized with her, let her know that he would be there for her. Having experienced sadness his entire life, he could not bear to see anyone else sad. Even if he had only known the woman for a few moments, she had been kind enough to invite him for dango and he wanted to show her kindness in return. To show her that she wasn't alone. Anko returned a smile of her own, letting the boy know that she was grateful and that she understood his pain just the same. They exchanged another smile. No words were said. They didn't need to. Even if they barely know each other, their pain connects them, almost like family. They each gave Kurenai a reassuring smile and the three settled into a comfortable silence as they waited for their order. Kurenai couldn't help but smile at her companions. She had seen the sadness on Naruto's face when he had dropped his mask. She couldn't help but admire his strength of will. To be hated and scorned by almost the entire village, yet he had overcome this hardship and remains innocent and pure of heart. He was so kind to Anko, even despite having only known her for less than an hour. She was honestly happy for the both of them. To finally find someone that could understand their pain. Even if she had been friends with Anko for a long time, she knew that there was a part of her behind the emotional wall Anko had built up that she would never be able to reach, having never experienced the same pain the purple-haired Junin had experienced. She hoped that Naruto could help Anko finally get on the road to healing. Not only for Anko, but for both of their sakes. For an entire month, Naruto would train with Kurenai in Genjutsu at least twice a week. They would always end up going to dinner together, as for some reason they could never be bothered to cook for themselves after their training sessions together. Even when not training, they could often be found together, mostly along with Anko. Anko had gotten somewhat fond of the blonde after that first night, and she liked to invite the boy when she and Kurenai went out for lunch, dinner or just to hang out. This night was no different. So where are we going to go eat tonight? Naruto asked his female companions. Dango. Anko cheered. Both Kurenai and Naruto groaned in complaint in unison. No way. We've had dango the last 3 times we went out for food. We should get some ramen, Naruto protested. Anko growled slightly. Who cares if we had it 3 times in a row? Ramen sucks. Dango is the way to go. What? Ramen is way better than dango. Naruto gave her an offended look. Anko stuck her face close to the boy and narrowed her eyes at the boy trying to intimidate him. No way is ramen better than dango. Unfortunately for her, Naruto would never back down when it came to ramen. Ramen is better. Dango. Ramen. Dango. Kurenai stared at the scene in amusement and couldn't help but let out a small laugh. It was funny sometimes seeing the two fighting like siblings. Hearing the laugh, the two stopped their argument and looked at Kurenai. Fine. We'll let Kurenai-chan decide what we'll have tonight, Anko suggested. Naruto nodded, and the two gave her an intense, expectant look. Kurenai couldn't help but sweat drop at the fierce competitiveness of the two when it came to their respective favorite food. I suppose we can go to that ramen place you like so much, Naruto. It's only fair since we've had dango for the last 3 times. Anko growled slightly at the triumphant grin on Naruto's face and the victory sign he flashed her, but settled on a pout for being denied her precious dango. She decided to get some payback and wipe that smirk off his face. Taking your little boyfriend's side now, are we, Kurenai-chan? Kurenai and Naruto instantly blushed beet red and the boy choked slightly on his breath. Anko returned the triumphant grin, smirking even wider seeing the glare Naruto sent her way. Kurenai meanwhile was trying to make herself seem as small as possible to hide her embarrassment. She had learned much about Naruto throughout the month. He was hardworking, kind and cares deeply for his friends. She even found him good-looking albeit a bit too young. It was no surprise that she had thought of Naruto in a romantic sense more than once, despite how unlikely it was. She couldn't really blame herself. After all, he had all the qualities she looked for in a potential boyfriend. Even that innocent, childlike playfulness he had did not deter that thought. Still, Kurenai felt a little guilty. She felt like she was betraying Hinata. Not only was she closer to Naruto than Hinata had ever been, and even if their relationship was strictly between friends, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like if he was her age. She knew it was not going to happen considering how much younger than her he was, but it didn't make her feel less ashamed. Especially since helping Hinata win his heart was one of the reasons she wanted to get to know the young man better. And rather than making progress in that respect, here she was fantasizing about him being all grown up. When the three arrived at the Ichiraku ramen stand, they sat down with Kurenai and Anko on each side of Naruto. "Hi Asen, Ayame-chan." Naruto called to the father and daughter that worked at the stand. "Hi Naruto-kun," Ayame smiled sweetly at him. Unlike most other villagers, the ramen girl had always liked Naruto. To her, he was always a nice boy, determined and caring. She knew he would be great boyfriend or husband material when he matured. And she knew that he was starting to mature recently. Not to mention she was starting to find him very handsome with the way he was growing, especially now that he had abandoned his old jumpsuit. Meanwhile, Kurenai had caught the looks Ayame was giving Naruto. Kurenai frowned and found herself unconsciously clenching her hands into tight fists. Although unaware of what she was doing, the raven-haired beauty instinctively shifted in her seat so her body leaned towards Naruto, almost as if she was possessive of him. Ayame caught the gesture and frowned in response, before settling with a small glare at Kurenai. Tension began to rise. Naruto on the other hand remained oblivious to the exchange between Kurenai and Ayame. But their actions were not lost to Anko, who couldn't help but smirk at the fun she could have with teasing Kurenai later. "So, what would you and your friends like?" Tyuki asked his number one customer with a smile. "A miso ramen for me please." Naruto called cheerfully. "Can I have a seafood ramen please?" Kurenai answered in a polite tone to Tyuki, before sending a glare of her own at Ayame. "A pork ramen for me." Anko cheered, eager to get some food in her stomach, although nowhere near as enthusiastic as Naruto. For Naruto, the wait for ramen seemed to be excruciatingly long, but in reality it had only been a few minutes. After the food was served, they ate their food, while the three engaged in a light conversation. Kurenai had seemed to calm down after Ayame had returned to her work. "So Naruto, I didn't know you liked older women. I thought you liked Sakura." A voice from behind them teased. The three turned and found the copy Nin Kakashi looking at them in amusement. Naruto blushed bright red and crossed his arms and looked at Kakashi indignantly. "I got over Sakura a while ago. And so what if I do like older women? You jealous or something?" Kurenai immediately blushed a deep red. He likes older women. Does it mean he might like me that way? If it was possible, her face turned even redder at that thought. But Kurenai stopped her immediate train of thought. She should not think about things like that. He was way too young for her, right? And Hinata likes him, right? But he liked older women. Kurenai quickly caught herself again and stopped those thoughts drifting back into her mind once again. She didn't even know why these thoughts keep making their way into her mind. Sure, Naruto was a very nice boy, but she was sure she didn't like him that way. Not to mention he was too young. Right. Plus, she was supposed to help Hinata win his heart. Ayame meanwhile, was inwardly cheering. "Yes, I thought he might not like me because I'm a few years older than him. I have a chance, all I have to do is lure him with ramen, there's no way he can resist." Ayame thought with a wicked grin. Anko blushed slightly, but otherwise just smirked. She snuck a glance at Kurenai who seemed to be in some kind of inner conflict, then to the girl from the ramen store, before looking at Naruto. Her smirk grew larger. "Oh yeah, so much teasing material. Oh, you really do like older women. I was just teasing. And what's this?" Kurenai and Anko. At the same time, Kakashi continued his teasing. Naruto's face turned bright red at his sensei's accusations and was about to reply. Anko stepped in and grabbed the Junin by the front of his shirt. "Are you implying something?" Anko gave the copy Nin a sickly sweet smile that somehow, couldn't even hide the dangerous undertone. Kakashi sweated slightly under the purple-haired Junin's stare. Nothing. Nothing, Kakashi said quickly, waving his arms trying to placate the bloodthirsty Kunoichi. Anko narrowed her eyes slightly at him, before finally releasing him. Well then, have fun you three. The copy nin called out in a rush before leaving via Shunshin no Jutsu. Naruto groaned. Oh man, I bet I'm gonna be on the end of his jokes for a long time. How was your date last night, Naruto? Kakashi teased. Sakura and Sasuke looked at Naruto suddenly, stunned. Naruto had a date. Since when did he have a girlfriend? Sakura felt a small pang in her chest when she looked at the blonde. Naruto has a girlfriend now. Was that the reason he no longer paid her much attention like he used to? Was it because he found someone better than her? She realized now how much Naruto really affected her. She realized now that it was because of Naruto, not Sasuke, that she had gotten over her low self-confidence when she was younger. It was because of how determined he was in gaining her affection that let her know that at least someone found her beautiful, desirable even. But now that he no longer did that, she found herself without that reassurance. And she couldn't help but feel self-doubt slowly creeping back in her mind. Even lately, without that assurance, her efforts to woo Sasuke hadn't been as determined as it had used to be. She couldn't help but question her own self-worth. Was she not beautiful enough? Was it because of her large forehead? Did Naruto feel that she was no longer worthy of him now that he was actually good-looking? Did Naruto finally realize there were better and more beautiful girls than her? Was that why he abandoned her? Sakura clenched her fist tightly. She couldn't understand why Naruto having a girlfriend bothered her so much. So what if he found himself a girlfriend? As long as she got Sasuke, then it shouldn't matter to her, right? Right. But why did it hurt so bad? Why did she want Naruto's attention all to herself when she wanted Sasuke, not Naruto? It wasn't a date, damn it. Naruto growled. But how do you explain the blush on their faces? Kakashi continued in a teasing tone. There. As in more than one. Sakura felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She hated that feeling. She had to resist the urge to punch something or someone. And in this case, that would be Naruto. Sasuke just stood there to the side looking at Kakashi and Naruto in amusement. It was obvious to him that Kakashi was just messing around with Naruto's head. Though he was curious as to whom Naruto had went out with that gave him that blush he sported now. What the hell are you talking about? Naruto growled out in annoyance. Oh, nothing, Kakashi said innocently.